Are you there? Here I am again. I hope everybody is taking all your precautions and that you're washing your hands a lot and that you're, hopefully, if you have to go out, you're using masks and things like that. And giving everybody their space. It's kind of a time for us to give each other our space. But anyway, perhaps you've heard California is completely locked down. And so what a wonderful time for us to catch up on our reading and our Netflix and our Hulu and our meditations and our yoga and all of our mystical practices that we always say that we don't have enough time for. So greetings of the Vernal Equinox 2020 EV. And welcome back to the Fraternal Order of Sequestered Mystics. We put the quest back in sequestment. But anyway, we're on chapter 2. This is my clipboard. Well, actually, yesterday was chapter 0. This is chapter 1. And if we have enough time, and if you're patient enough, we'll go through chapter 2 also, which is pretty. Both of them are pretty short chapters. So if you're ready, here we go. It's chapter 1 of My Life with the Spirits. And the chapter title is I Am Born. And there's a footnote to it, to the title, so I'll read the footnote. My brother Mark tells me that when our parents brought me home from the hospital, the nanny who had cared for him picked me up over her head, looked into my drooling face, and said, "I wonder what he was in his previous life." My mother snatched me from her hands, called her a witch, and fired her on the spot. I am born. Except for the frustration and embarrassment of incontinence, infancy was a perfectly delightful experience. Soon after I learned to walk, it was discovered that I was afflicted with Perthes disease in my right hip. Perthes is a serious bone malady that crumbles the topmost part of the thigh. In order to prevent complete disintegration of my hip socket, the doctors ordered me off my feet and back to the crib. This was fine with me. It meant I could comfortably lounge undisturbed for many hours each day, drifting blissfully in and out of consciousness. Unlike able-bodied children who, as soon as they begin to walk and talk, lose the precious memories of their pre-linguistic inner life, my little brain was allowed to crystallize and permanently register those thoughts and images. As long as I was quiet, my mother was quite satisfied to leave me in my semi-conscious musings. Among these were visions of myself as an adult man, crouching in a dirt trench with a half a dozen other men. It was night, but the sky would brighten from time to time with brilliant explosions. Oddly enough, this image wasn't particularly frightening. The most frequent recurring picture that projected itself upon the screen of my bedroom ceiling was triggered by the smell of night-blooming jasmine that my father had planted near my nursery window. I saw myself, again as an adult man, stepping into a car that I would later determine was of late 1920s or early 1930s vintage, and driving south on what I later would discover was the Pacific Coast Highway 101 from Santa Monica to Ensenada, Mexico. The night was hot, and all I could think of was a woman. The woman I was to meet there. I was in love. I physically ached to be with my lover. My infantile mind couldn't visualize what exactly I was going to do with her, but certain parts of my newly acquired baby body informed me in no uncertain terms that there were many things that could indeed be done. The reader who may be theorizing that these feelings and images were suggested by things I had seen on television or in the movies, they must remember that as a bedridden infant in 1948 to 1950, I had not been exposed to either medium. I'm not sharing this information with you in order to prove anything about reincarnation or genetic memory. I can't even put up a good argument for the reality of life after birth. I only want you to know that the overriding character of my self-identity was that of an adult trapped in an infant's body. I still possessed the emotions of a child. I couldn't read or write. I couldn't do calculus or play the violin. I was as stupid, naive, and crabby as any child. I simply couldn't wait to grow up to feel like myself. This created a level of tension whenever I interacted with family members. I detested being patronized like a child and cursed my helpless condition. I vividly remember after one particularly agonizing event, probably relating to food or poop, vowing in passionate babbles, I hate being a baby. If I ever grow up, I'll never get myself in this position again. Without a doubt, the most profound of these crib meditations was an exercise I practiced daily, whereby I pondered the nature of my own existence. Without benefit of words to frame the questions, I somehow asked myself, was I off before I was on? If I weren't I, who am I? And if not me, who? I then tried to imagine myself not on. I never succeeded. Each time I imagined myself switched off, I instantly found myself switched on in another consciousness center. My brother, my mother, my father, or someone else. This frustrated me no end because if there was one thing I did know, it was that I was I and nobody else. Nevertheless, I played this game every day in hopes I would someday break out of the helical loop. I finally gave up. It was also in my crib that I first was exposed to religious propaganda. As soon as I was old enough not to eat them, my mother gave me copies of The Upper Room, a tiny booklet published regularly by the Methodist Church. The cover of each issue displayed a famous painting depicting incidents in the life of Christ, walking on water, knocking at the door, the crucifixion, reaching for the lost lamb, the Last Supper, that sort of thing. At first, I wanted to like this Jesus character, but I was really disturbed by my mother's insistence that I wouldn't really get to know him until I was dead. Moreover, she told me that he looked down from heaven and saw everything I did. He even knew what I was thinking. She warned me if I didn't believe in him or was naughty, that terrible things would happen to me when I died. Jesus and his Father would put me in hell, a place she described as a lake of fire where you'll have nightmares and never be able to wake up. Every night after tucking me in bed, she led me in prayer. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. This prayer did not comfort me at all. It was an oath I was forced to take against my will. It terrified me and plunged me into a nightly crisis. My soul was very real to me. As a person who drifted in and out of consciousness all day and night, I knew my soul to be my only true identity. Being a baby was humiliating enough, but the thought of this ghost god coming down from the clouds to steal my soul before I could grow old enough to use the toilet was horrifying. I could not put this dreadful thought out of my mind. And sure enough, shortly after my 4th birthday, the Lord would come to my bedside, my soul to take. And that was the end of chapter 1. If you have enough patience for a short chapter 2, I will continue. So tomorrow we can start in on chapter 3. Do I have your permission to do that? If you have to go, you can still catch this video on my page whenever you want. I won't delete it for a long, long time. Are we ready for chapter 2? Chapter 2, My Vision of Christ. My mother was born in 1913 in the barren sandhills of western Nebraska. Her mother, Clara, whose ancestors fought in the American Revolution, came from sturdy Pennsylvania Dutch stock. Mom's father, Dewey, was the bastard son of the daughter of a Scottish rancher named McConnell and a full-blood Cherokee Indian named William Lake. Great-grandfather Lake, it seems, was quite the cowboy and made his living as a performer in traveling Wild West shows. These spectacles were very popular in the 1880s and offered some of the only employment opportunities for Native Americans during that genocidal era. His specialty was Roman riding, which is the act of standing on 2 galloping horses, 1 foot on one horse and 1 on the other. Shortly after inseminating my great-grandmother, he was trampled to pieces as a matinee finale. Naturally, the shame of begetting a bastard half-breed could not be borne by the McConnell clan, and so little Dewey was given up as soon as he was weaned. His new mother was an outlaw uncle who made ends meet by selling corn whiskey, which he distilled illicitly in the honeycomb of caves south of North Platte. My grandfather became the moonshiner's slave boy and grew to manhood, tending the fires and servicing the great copper kettles and coils. Out of necessity, he learned the art of the blacksmith, and eventually, when he was strong enough to defy his master, he moved to Hershey and set up shop. Later, he would marry Clara Purbaugh and try his hand at ranching. Before they divorced, they had 5 children, 2 boys, Glenn and Freeman, and 3 girls, Gladys, Lucinda, and Avis. Life on the plains was unbelievably harsh, and I mean no disrespect to the memories of those poor devils who, for whatever reasons, chose to stay and breed in that unforgiving wilderness. However, the sad fact remains that by the time my mother came into the world, the sandhills had petrified the souls of her people and stripped them of all but the most primitive aspects of character. What remained was a bitter stock of petty avarice, alcoholism, incest, brutality, and guilt. Suicide was a common remedy for this prairie madness. Getting saved was the other way out. For a few weeks after Amy Semple McPherson and her International Church of the Foursquare Gospel crusade came to the cattle town of Paxton, the men stayed on the wagon and the women folk developed attitudes. Lucinda, my teenage mother-to-be, reluctantly declined an offer to join the troop as a choir member. But she loved the colorful energy of revival and wholeheartedly surrendered to a childlike belief in that particular brand of Bible abuse. Fortunately, in our early years, my brother Mark and I were for the most part spared direct contamination from my mother's sad and unwholesome kin. We were Southern California kids like our dad. Our house always had electricity and indoor plumbing. Our father was a Freemason. He drilled oil wells. He'd gone to UCLA. He read books. He played golf. But his story will come later. In July of 1952, Dad sacrificed his 2-week vacation, loaded up the Buick, and drove us all back to Nebraska to visit Mom's relatives. I had just turned 4. And I was still not permitted to walk. We took historic Route 66 part of the way. It was quite an adventure. Dad didn't like to stop the car except for gas or sleep, so when nature called, Mark and I were obliged to carefully pee in a glass jar in the back seat. Mom would then fling the hot piss out of the passenger side window, ignoring the fact that much of it blew back through the open back window and back into our faces. I was carsick most of the time, and my poor brother became so feverishly delirious as we crossed the Arizona desert that he tearfully pleaded with Dad to stop the car so he could sit in the shade of a jackrabbit. The 1,500-mile trip took 4 days. Our destination was a genuine ghost town called Wallace. Located about 50 monotonous miles southwest of North Platte, and at least 80 years back in time, Wallace had grown like a melanoma around the loading platform of the Burlington Northern Railroad. During the 20s, it was the home of nearly 700 hardy souls and boasted a doctor, a dentist, a drugstore, a barber shop, hardware, sundry and grocery stores, a blacksmith shop, a movie house, and a hotel. By 1952, fewer than 300 called Wallace home. The final leg of our trip was 50 miles of dusty gravel road and prairie grass. Eventually, the pointed cap of an ancient water tower pierced the hymen of the horizon. Wallace is a pretty little town, my father quipped. Wasn't it? Mark and I were not amused. We knew we would have no fun in Wallace. The business district was a dirt street about 3 blocks long, a dusty arcade of deserted buildings. From any point along this shallow canyon of shells, a person could look to either end of the street and see nothing but prairie. There were some signs of life, a saloon on the corner, where we would find Uncle Freeman, a barber shop directly across the street, its once colorful pole cracked and bleached in the sun. C.W. Smith's grocery store, smelling of fresh butchered meat and rotting melons. And the hotel. Its second-floor rooms had seen no guests since before the war. Its lobby and first-floor coffee shop, the only place in town with ceiling fans. On both sides of the main street, it wasn't named Main Street, none of the streets were named or numbered, was a village of remarkably well-built houses with enormous yards, ancient trees, and broken sidewalks. Electricity came late to Wallace, and many of the yards still had working windmill pumps and primitive diesel generators. Every backyard had an outhouse, and every basement a coal chute. The most prominent building in town was the old schoolhouse, a dark two-story brick monstrosity that looked more like a 19th century foundry than a school. On the cold gray cornerstone near the great double door was chiseled the year of its erection, 1917. My mother and her brothers and sisters attended high school there in the 20s and 30s. As we drove by, I could almost see in the windows the ghosts of suicidal farm boys in overalls. See those doors? When I was 15, they slammed shut behind me so hard that a big chunk of plaster broke loose from the ceiling and hit me right on my head. Mom pulled back the part in her silver hair to reveal a long pink scar. I didn't want to look. They thought I was dead. I don't know how long I was out. Within 2 months, my hair turned completely gray. Things like that happen in Nebraska. That night, we drove 20 miles further into nowhere to have dinner at the new home of one of Mom's cousins. The new home, we would discover, was not yet finished. As a matter of fact, only the basement had been dug and cinder blocked. Still, like a family of grotesque prairie dogs, my kinsmen crammed their stove and other furniture into the hole in the sod and covered it all with a tarpaulin. Dad carried me down the creaking steps. I was greeted warmly by the patriarch prairie dog, who pulled my hair and said, "So, this is Ronnie. This boy's too goddamn big to be carried around like a baby. You leave this one with us. He don't look like no cripple. We'll have him on his goddamn feet and doing chores in no goddamn time." Dinner, and I'm not even exaggerating, dinner was a buffet of fatty ham, fried chicken, home-canned corn, and green beans. Everything smelled like gasoline. There were at least 6 sunken mystery pies that reeked of lard, and a huge bowl of lime jello topped with, of all things, mayonnaise. Inexplicably, they called this quivering monstrosity salad. Except for the celery stalks stuffed with browning cream cheese and some grape Kool-Aid, I couldn't even look at the food. Sensing my terror at the bill of fare, my country cousins amused themselves by thrusting various morsels of mystery meat into my mouth when I least expected it. These simple folk never seemed to tire of the game. I eventually joined in the fun and started to cry, which I finally realized was the object of the game. Before the evening was over, I became violently ill. Dad was relieved to have an excuse to leave early and bundled us into the car. As we sped back over the moonless prairie, my mother pushed my head out of the car window so I wouldn't vomit on her new dress. I stared out into the clear Nebraska sky and saw for the first time in my young life the glory of the Milky Way. Sick as I was transfixed. I'd never seen anything like that in California. The creamy cloud of stars seemed to go on forever, like the desert, like the prairie. Suddenly, the fabric of my newfound heaven was ruptured by a flaming red ball with a magnificent silver tail. I had never seen a shooting star before. It was breathtaking. But it startled me so that I reacted as if it were a personal violation, a cruel cosmic barb aimed at me. When you're sick, everything irritates you. By the time we reached Aunt Gladys's house in Wallace, I was out of my head with fever and had severe diarrhea. I know how to stop him shitting. Aunt Gladys was an enormous woman, crippled since childhood with a disease that gelatinized her bones, but she was a diarrhea expert. It took both Dad and Uncle Guy to hold me down while the women folk administered the enema of cold water and cornstarch. I screamed myself unconscious, trying to avoid this enlightened remedy. It had been a bad day. When I woke up, I found myself alone in a large bed in the guest room. The room was dark and smelled like bleach, Vicks Vapo Rub, and tobacco. The house was quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. I drifted in and out of a fevered dream that found me pedaling my tricycle down the main street of Wallace. Every building was alive with legions of cowboy ghosts, wandering aimlessly in and out of the stores. One of them spoke to me and invited me to go upstairs to Johnny Skeleton's mouse house and asked me something about nails for the baseball game. Wallace is a ghost town, another voice announced. I couldn't have agreed more. I closed my eyes and listened to the crickets and the hiss in my brain caused by fever. When I opened them again, I was startled to see someone standing at the foot of my bed. Not just someone, it was Jesus. Standing in a long white robe, his arms stretched to his side, the bloody palms of his hands turned toward me. I'd never been so afraid in all my life. I pulled the covers over my head and mentally chanted, for I knew he could read my mind. Please go away. I'm not dead. I just had diarrhea. Go away, please. I'm better now. Go away. I tried to calm myself down. I'm having a bad dream, I told myself. But I'm awake now. Jesus is not at the foot of the bed. Slowly, I pulled back the covers from over one eye. Still there. Jesus was still there. I dove, this time more deeply beneath the covers. I was burning with fever. Hell is a lake of fire where you have nightmares and can never wake up. I wanted more than anything to be home in my own bed, in my own cool house in California. Jesus wouldn't dare come to California to get me. He needed enemas and ghosts and outhouses and long pink scars and fatty meat and jello with mayonnaise to be God. I don't know how many times I plunged under the suffocating covers. Each time I resurfaced, Jesus was still there, waiting patiently for my soul to take. My fear turned into panic and then into hate. I hated Jesus. I hated my relatives and all the grown-ups who believed in this monster and made him real. If I were grown up, if I were strong, I would make him go away, but I'm weak. I'm a weak little kid. It isn't fair. What kind of God terrorizes little kids when they're sick? Why did I ever invite him to take my soul? Finally, exhaustion and lack of oxygen prevailed, and I drifted into unconsciousness with my head buried under the sweat-soaked pillows. I would not awaken until the cheeping of sparrows told me the sun was up. The morning light gave me courage to confront my terror. I threw the pillows and covers off my face and sat straight up. Jesus was gone. In his place, my mother's yellow dress hung neatly from the closet door. That's the end of chapter 2, My Vision of Christ from My Life with the Spirits. Love is the law, love and it will. I hope you've enjoyed this and will be with me tomorrow. And I'll read another chapter, maybe 2. You guys have a good day. Take care of yourselves. Be good to yourselves. Bye-bye.